Hey everybody, it's Nathan Hamilton, the Son of Celluloid, back here at Days of the Dead. We were speaking with Richard Massur. How you doing today?
Okay.
You enjoying the con?
Yeah.
Now, we were talking a little bit before the camera went on. You've done a lot of great movies in your life, but to me, you will always be the dad from Mr. Boogedy. I had heard at one point that was actually conceived as a pilot for a series. Is that correct?
No, that was never. No, what it was that we were one of the very first of the Disney Sunday night movies, and that was the series. The series was the Disney Sunday night movies. And when Michael Eisner took over Disney, one of the things he remembered as a kid, because we're of an age, okay,
right.
I remember too, was growing up with these. Well, first Walt Disney Presents was the original show,
right.
and then the Walt Disney show, and then they would have these specials which were on Sunday nights, the Disney
right.
Sunday night movies, and we just, as kids, that was something you look forward to every week.
Right.
So he wanted to revive that. And he loved this script from Mr. Boogedy. We made the movie, and he was so crazy about the movie that before it even aired, he ordered a sequel to be made.
Right.
And he did a special 2-hour version, because the first one's an hour, which is what almost all of them were.
Right.
And then the second one was a 2-hour special.
Okay.
And that was The Bride of Boogedy.
Right.
And, I'm going to say this so everybody watching, listen to me. A lot of people love this movie. A lot of people would love to own this movie and would love to show it to their friends, but also to their kids now. And Disney has never released this. They've never released these movies. I don't know why. Nobody's ever been able to explain why. So go online, figure out how to do it. I wish I knew exactly what to tell you. But write to Disney and say, please release Mr. Boogedy and The Bride of Boogedy so we can get them, so we can download them, so we can buy them on DVD, so we can have these films. Because a lot of people love them, and it's crazy that they don't.
Now, there's another film that you were in that I really like that's almost impossible to find now, called Far From Home.
Oh my God.
I really dig that flick. Do you give me any memories of making that flick, and in particular working with Dick Miller? Because he's one of my favorites. What was working with him like?
It was a very, 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 very peculiar shoot. We were out on the Black Rock Desert. We were staying in a place called Gerlach, Nevada, which the motto of which was where the pavement ends and the West begins. And the pavement actually ended at Gerlach. And as you rode out of town, there were no more paved roads. And the Black Rock Desert is this enormous hard-pan desert that just goes on for miles and miles and miles, which is right next to this town. And the town is a spot along the main rail line from the Northern California across to the Sacramento Delta. No, that's wrong. Through Nevada. It goes all the way through Nevada. Every night, we were all staying. There was no place to stay in this town. There was like a rooming house and a motel that about 6 people could go into. So they rented houses all over town, and people just moved out while we were shooting. It was a very, very low-budget film, and a bunch of us were staying in trailers, but little trailers that they had pulled up for this.
Right.
So they wired them up, and they plumbed them and gotten us water. So we had working toilets and sort of a shower, like in a little tiny trailer. And the first night I was there, I get into bed, I go to sleep. It's about midnight. I fall asleep. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the earth starts moving. I mean, moving. I'm not exaggerating. The whole thing was doing this, going like this. And I jumped out of bed because I've been living in California for a long time at that point, and I just went, oh, God, earthquake. I jumped out of bed, jumped outside the trailer, and I realized there's a 110-car freight train going by. The tracks are about 100 yards from where I'm sitting, and the whole ground moved every time this. And every night at 2 o'clock in the morning, this huge freight went through and did this. Boom, 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 boom. And every night you woke up doing this. So it was nuts. The whole shoot was nuts. Matt Frewer was great. He was a lot of fun to work with. The DP was great. I worked with him a few times after that, and I love the character. And Drew was at a very troubled period in her life then, but she was great to work with. And also Anthony Rapp, the little blonde boy, he was great. He turned into an amazing actor too. And the other guy, the guy with the dark hair, I just blanked on his name. He got into rock music and ended up playing in a couple of bands, I think.
Okay. Seemed like the rock type in the flick. Now, speaking of filming movies in some strange conditions, of course, the movie you're here mainly to talk about doing the reunion for The Thing. Do you have any interesting stories about filming, I know it was mainly shot, a lot of it was shot on a soundstage, but you definitely went to Alaska for some time. Do you have any interesting stories from up there?
Yeah, we were up there for about 2.5, 3 weeks. I was only there for about a week and a half of that time.
Right.
And, well, I mean, there are a lot of interesting stories. It was a very extreme circumstance. We were shooting sometimes, it was 50 below zero. The inside of the station in the exterior shots, the building that was there was a shell. It was just a wooden shell. There was nothing in there, and it wasn't insulated or anything. They had some propane heaters inside, and we'd go in there on breaks, and it was about 20 degrees inside the buildings, and we'd all take everything off and strip down to our T-shirts, because outside it was 70 degrees colder, so we couldn't stand sitting in there in our clothes. So, that's one thing. We had camera issues because it was old-fashioned film camera and keeping that stuff warm. You're amazing. You're just amazing. The way you... Thomas Waits, ladies and gentlemen, just walks right through the camera. It's like Fred Armistead playing the governor of New York.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Anyway,
It's cool, man.
anyway, so there was a lot of stuff going on up there.
Very cool. Now, of course, one of the things that makes that movie so incredible is the chemistry amongst the cast. Did that more come from the characters on the script, or just through the rehearsal process and getting to know each other?
It was Bill Lancaster did a really good job building these characters in the script, and John very amazingly scheduled us into about 2 weeks, about 2 weeks of rehearsal, which was highly unusual for most films at that time, and certainly for a film like this, it was unheard of. And we got to sit around and talk about what was going on, who meant what to whom, what we thought about each other. And Bill listened to that. He worked in some little bits of stuff if John liked them and he liked them. And that's where we started building the chemistry. And then we were together for 3.5 months. I mean, plus we actually shot over the course of about 5 months, but we shut down for about a month and a half to let the snow build up on the Salmon Glacier in British Columbia. And we stayed in touch, and we all got to be friends. I mean, there's nobody I worked with on that film who, when I see, we don't throw our arms around each other and say hi. Partly because it was a lot of fun, but also partly there was a certain amount of shared suffering, So.
Now, another thing that makes, of course, that movie so amazing is the effects. Did you get to, see them as they were being developed? Did you see them for the first time on set? When did those come into the picture?
Yes, some I saw before. Very, very little we saw on set, actually. One of the only things we saw that was a big deal effect on set was, and it wasn't really an effect, it was a construction. It was the Hulk, the burned out Hulk from the Norwegian camp that Wilfred Brimley dissects. And that was a construction that Rob Bottin made, this amazingly talented man. And that was actually, we worked with that. But mostly everything else that was crazy in the film wasn't there when we were shooting. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. When he takes the hot wire and he touches it into the Petri dish of blood, and that thing, all that happened that we saw was he touched it and a little puff of smoke came off from chemicals that were on the wire and in the liquid. interacting, and
a little less dramatic.
And originally it was written that when the wire touched, the blood all spread apart, like broke into pieces and kind of scurried away within the dish. But sometime later, Rob got this idea, and he changed it to the thing that you see now, where he goes out and this little thing pops up and goes, ah, la, la, and then Kurt throws the thing away. So, there was a lot in that was frankly my favorite effect because A, it was so simple, and B, it was so startling. I mean, everybody jumps, and every time I've ever seen the film with anybody else, everybody does that when it happens. And for me, it's much crazier than some of the, big elaborate effects. It's just this one little, it was a little balloon thing that he made that was kind of flat and could hide under the fluid, and then he literally squeezed the little bulb and it popped up, and then they sped it up so it looked like it was going like that. Really simple effect.
Now, from a movie with great effects to one with maybe not so great effects, you fought a giant rat in Nightmares.
Horrible visuals. Was
there anything standing in for the rat, or were you actually just fighting nothing?
No, I was looking at nothing, and then later on they had, the big rat was a guy in a suit, and it looked like a guy in the suit.
Right.
But that was, interestingly, that actually was originally supposed to be a pilot.
Okay.
That was a pilot.
The wrong movie there.
No, that was a pilot for a series that was going to be called Nightmares, and it was going to be, like The Outer Limits or something, except with horror instead of science fiction. And do you know what that is, The Outer Limits?
Yeah.
You're way young for that, but okay.
The classics never die or go out of style, man.
So and so we did these three episodes. I mean, 3 segments basically. Each one was whatever it was, a half an hour long or a little bit more, and that was supposed to be the launch pad. Well, what happened was they tested it, didn't test well, and they had a hole in their schedule, and they threw it out as a feature, which surprised all of us and made all of us a little bit of extra money, which was very nice. And the guy who directed it, Joe Sargent, was a really high-quality film director who was doing this kind of, because I think for the main reason was because it was a pilot, and when a pilot sells, the original director keeps getting paid forever, because just like the creator does. But because of the rat, basically, everything else was great in the movie, I thought. And Veronica Cartwright is just a wonderful actress and does horror stuff as well as anybody who ever lived. I mean, she and Jamie Lee Curtis were like the two, and her mom were like the queens of horror reactions. And plus, V could cry buckets of snot at the drop of a hat. I've never seen anything like it. She'd be standing there talking to you. They'd say, "Get ready." She'd turn away. 1, 2, 3. She'd turn back, and water would be pouring out of her eyes, and snot would be dripping out of her nose. I don't know how she did it. She was amazing to work with. She's a wonderful woman.
Cool. Now, one last question. You've had such a wide and varied career and so many great movies. What do you think is maybe an undiscovered gem in your filmography that people don't know as much about as The Thing or It or any of those kind of flicks that you think is really good and deserves more, exposure?
I mean, The Thing had a terrible release.
Yeah.
Horribly released, famously horribly released. Another film that I was in that had an equally horrible release was a great movie called Who'll Stop the Rain, with Nick Nolte and Michael Moriarty, Tuesday Weld, a guy named Ray Sharkey, who was a terrific actor. And it's a really great thriller made in the early 1970s. A little bit about Vietnam, but really more about what people do when their moral center is destroyed and they're going crazy. It's a really riveting film. It's funny and also really and disturbing.
Right.
It's a great film called Who'll Stop the Rain. Okay.
I'll have to check that out. I'd like to thank you very much for talking to me, and stay right here on the Son of Celluloid show for more interviews from Days of the Dead.